Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people would like to know is what the matchups are going to be in Wano, specifically during the war at Onigashima. Who is going to fight who? And this is a very difficult question because there are so many characters involved in this arc. Probably the most we've ever seen in the entire series, at least when it comes to the Strawhats being involved. The only other battle that is comparable in terms of characters is Marineford. Now, there's the obvious ones that we know are going to take place for sure, like Kaido and Luffy, or Kid versus Kaido, or even Kaido versus Law. But when it comes to these supporting casts or characters that aren't as pivotal as the Yonkos or Luffy, it's very hard to say. And one of the main reasons I say this is because I feel like Oda is going to mix things up in a way that we don't see coming. A lot of these matchups that we think are going to play out may not even happen. Now, Zoro versus King is probably a matchup that I think a lot of people have in mind just because he's the right hand to Kaido, just as Zoro is to Luffy. He's a swordsman, and overall he just seems to be someone that would be a perfect matchup for Zoro. But with the reveal of Kaido's son, there is a possibility that might change as well. You never know. And we also know that Zoro is very invested into taking down Orochi as well. So it's very strange that we have a lot of matchups here that sort of fit in the narrative, but I feel like it would be too much if we have one person just take on several characters on the opposing side. Given that we have so many individuals in one place, I feel like battle should be more spread out and not just one character taking on several main figures on the enemy side. Now, granted, it is going to be a war, so it's very possible that one person can get a lot of fights, but I feel like each person would be preoccupied with the person that they're fighting. But today we're specifically going to be talking about the Monster Trio, and when I say Monster Trio, I am specifically referring to Djembe, Zoro, and Sanji, because I feel like Luffy is definitely a step above these guys right now. With advanced observation and armament, I feel like Luffy is comfortably right above first commander level or even stronger, and the reason I'm saying this is because Zoro and Sanji got power-ups in this arc, being Enma and the raid suit, because if they didn't, Luffy would definitely leave them in the dust. Now, there's also Djembe to talk about here, but Djembe is already certified when it comes to his strength. Djembe has a lot of feats that makes him a threat, and his showcasing in Marineford definitely makes him more credible as a fighter. Now, it's very questionable as to where he ranks within the current Monster Trio, but I think it's very fair to say that it's going to be a high to extreme diff fight if he does fight against Sanji or Zoro. So I would say he's very relative to them, or maybe he's in the gap between Sanji and Zoro. Now, first and foremost, let's look at Sanji. Who is Sanji gonna fight? Now, there's really one person that comes to mind. Actually, two individuals. The first one is sort of Sanji's warm-up fight, what I think Sanji's warm-up fight should be before he goes up a level, and that is page 1, mainly because Sanji has history with page 1. And if you guys remember, that was when he used the raid suit for the first time back in the Flower Capital, and this fight was very ambiguous because it didn't seem like any side suffered from the battle, but I will say that Sanji definitely had the edge because it seems like page 1 was overwhelmed by Sanji's versatility and speed. Granted, Sanji didn't actually do any main damage, but page 1 was definitely having a hard time hitting Sanji, and I think this sort of highlights one of the most important things about Zoans, and that is their durability. We know that you can actually hit them, but the problem is actually putting them down for the count, and this was an issue Luffy faced back in Impel Down, whereas he was definitely stronger than the Impel Down guards, but the problem was that they kept getting back up. So in essence, that's what I think is going to be one of the stronger assets for Kaido's crew, and this even goes to Kaido himself, whereas he's the epitome of durability. So these guys are going to be durable as hell, whereas you need really strong attacks to put them down for the count, and even more so if they're awakened. Now, for the most part, we all know what awakening does for regular Zoans, but when it comes to the ancient types, which is a lot of what the upper ranks have in Kaido's crew, it might be a lot different. Now, I'm not sure about the Flying Six, but I think the Calamities are definitely awakened. And so going back to page 1 here, and so I think this is sort of Sanji's warm-up fight before going into war, and obviously before he fights one of the Calamities, and I think this fight will serve to show us a glimpse of what Sanji is truly capable of. Because for the most part, ever since we got into the new world, we've never seen Sanji really go all out. I mean, you get Jabba here and there, but it was nothing major for the most part. Sanji has been using a lot of pre-time skip skill sets. I think it's only natural to say that he has more that he hasn't shown yet. This is something that also applies to Zoro as well, where we haven't seen what he's truly capable of. I mean, if you think about it, Zoro hasn't even used Ashura yet. And one of the main reasons for this is because they've never been put in a situation or given a fight to show the full spectrum of their power. It's usually just one-off things like Virgo versus Sanji that lasted like for 2 minutes, or Sanji versus Doflamingo where it was just a clash and nothing more. Even if they do get overpowered, it's not really a gauge that you can use to sort of judge what level that they are at. And that's that's one of the biggest things that applies to Sanji and Zoro, which makes it very hard to power scale them. But judging from how things are looking right now, it seems like they're going to be fighting commanders in the war. Now granted, some of these fights may actually be tag teams. We know that Inu and Neko are definitely going to fight Jack together, so I wouldn't say it is a stretch that other fights would get tag teams as well. Now I'm not saying that Zoro and Sanji will have tag team fights, but I think people should be more open to that idea. Now his main fight, or what I think his main fight would be, is Queen, for obvious reasons, like Sanji being the person that always fights the third strongest on the enemy side. We also know that Queen has a very quirky personality that is similar to Ivankov, which might make Sanji reminisce about the Okama, which could fuel his rage even more. And we know that Queen seems to be an engineer or a scientist of sorts, or is involved in science in some way, shape, or form, as he was the person who developed the virus back in Udon. And that could tie into Sanji having the raid suit, because both of them use science as a way to fight. Now, one of the more interesting things about this matchup is that this is sort of a good way for Sanji to overcome one of the areas that he lacks in, and that is offensive power. Now granted, he does have Diablo Djembe, but I'm not exactly sure if that's going to be enough for the Calamities, especially if these guys are awakened. I think Sanji needs more power to take on these guys, in which I think he will most likely develop something in this fight to defeat Queen. And based on what we know about Queen, it seems like he has the most durable Devil Fruit amongst the Calamities, even more so than Jack's Devil Fruit. The Brachiosaurus is one of the biggest dinosaurs in like the prehistoric era, so this fight is going to be good for Sanji because he would have to find a way to make his attack stronger. We saw that Queen was able to endure attacks from Big Mom, but was able to recover quite easily, so this is going to be a struggle for Sanji and a good way to overcome one of his biggest weaknesses, right? And then we move on to Zoro. Now Zoro's full power is something that we've been waiting for. Zoro has been running through the new world with minimal difficulties. Granted, no one that strong got in his way, and so finally we're going to have this fight that will push this man to show everything that he has. And with this, we can finally gauge where Zoro is at in terms of strength, and also because we want to see Zoro go all out. I feel like this has been in the making for such a long time. You know, Zoro has been debated for several years now. How strong is Zoro? And I think it's about time we finally get Zoro at his max. And with that, I think it's very obvious what the matchup here, and it seems that King is going to be Zoro's matchup. Again, just like Sanji, for obvious reasons, King is a swordsman. King is the second strongest person apart from Kaido, and personality wise they seem to be very similar. Now, will Zoro have a warm-up fight before he goes to fight King? Now, with the reveal of the Flying Six in the last chapter, I think it's very possible. Now, amongst the Flying Six, it seems that there's a swordsman amongst them, if you noticed in the last panel, so I could see Zoro taking on this person, and again, it would serve as a good way to show how potent Enma is in battle, and as well as the mastery Zoro has with it now. Now, King seems to be a very unconventional swordsman because he has a flying dragon fruit. I think it's very safe to say that King could incorporate flying into his fighting style, which would make for a very interesting matchup for Zoro because it's not going to be as straightforward. Perhaps this would force Zoro to take a more technical stance on how he approaches things. So far, Zoro's attacks aren't really skill based. Not saying that Zoro isn't a skillful swordsman, but a lot of his skill sets focuses more on DC, and I feel like there has to be more to swordsmanship than just brute strength. And I think this is why Zoro was very interested in Kinemon's swordsmanship back in Punk Hazard. Perhaps he's lacking in the more technical aspect. And so his fight with King could easily make him branch out to other areas of swordsmanship. Again, maybe he has already, but he just hasn't been pushed to use it yet. So only time will tell. But I'm definitely looking forward to this, and let's not forget about Zoro's left eye, which I will have a video about, so stay tuned. And finally, we move on to Djembe, and there isn't really much to say about Djembe. And again, Djembe, as I mentioned before, has a lot of feats that makes him a big asset in the alliance. So with Djembe, it's not more so of him getting stronger, just more so of what role he's going to play in the war. And with Djembe, I could see him fighting against Jack, possibly, but then again, that is a fight for Neko and Inu. And so it's sort of ambiguous with Djembe. However, I do see a possible plot line with him and Big Mom, and possibly the Big Mom pirates as well. They haven't showed up recently, so I wonder what's going on with those guys. So I'm not entirely sure, but I've always envisioned Djembe to be an amazing support fighter in the sense that he's going to be more focused on the bigger picture more so than individual fights. So I usually think back to Marco's role in Marineford, where he was sort of reinforcing key points in the war and giving out orders to the other commanders. And so I think it's more of a leadership role that Djembe is going to play here, and him being a reliable advisor, it's only natural that those skills will be a big asset for the alliance. But that is pretty much it for this video, guys. What do you guys think the matchups are going to be? Who do you have fighting who? I'm definitely interested in what you guys have to say, but comment down below what you guys think. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more One Piece content. It is Pharaoh, and I will see you folks later. Peace.